Amid sweeping tariffs and rising global tensions, the U.S. economy has contracted for the first time in 3 years, with a 0.3% GDP decline in the first quarter of 2025. Skyrocketing import costs, plummeting consumer confidence, and the stubborn inflation are reshaping domestic markets and straining trade alliances. As protectionist policies disrupt supply chains and corporate profits falter, stock market volatility signals growing unease among investors. Is this a temporary setback or a deeper structural crisis? These questions will be asked given the midterm elections looming. America faces critical questions about its economic future and its leadership on the world stage. I'm Rehan Morsi and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Guardian has reported that the U.S. economy contracted by 0.3% in the first quarter of 2025, its first decline since 2022, amid surging tariffs and a 32% drop in consumer sentiment to levels unseen since the 1990 recession. While President Donald Trump blames Biden's policies, economists link the slump to a pre-tariff import surge. The newspaper added that escalating trade tensions and retaliatory measures, including China's 125% tariffs, are straining global commerce. U.S. industries face turmoil as e-commerce exports from China plummet 65%. Weak payroll growth raises fears of a labor market struggle, though reduced imports may aid the second quarter's GDP. Concerns linger over long-term impacts on American leadership and global alliances, with critics questioning if Trump's tariffs deepen structural vulnerabilities. President Donald Trump's aggressive 2025 tariff strategy is reshaping the U.S. economy, fueling reassuring hopes while straining wallets, markets, and global ties.
The Honorable Donald John Trump.
In 2025, President Donald Trump returned to office with a familiar promise: America first. But this time, it came with a sharper economic edge. From Washington to Wall Street, Trump's sweeping tariffs up to 145% on Chinese goods sent ripples through global trade. Designed to revive U.S. manufacturing and bring jobs back home, the policy has reshaped supply chains and redrawn battle lines in international commerce. But the costs are mounting. Auto and electronic makers now pay up to 25% more for critical components. Small businesses, especially in retail and furniture, report canceled shipments and thinning profit margins. Consumers? They're already feeling the pinch. Car prices are up, grocery bills higher, and confidence is slipping. In March, consumer sentiment hit a 12-year low. The broader economy is slowing too. The first quarter of 2025 saw a negative 0.3% contraction, with warning signs flashing across Midwest manufacturing hubs. Meanwhile, global retaliation is underway. $330 billion in U.S. exports now face tariffs abroad. Still, the administration insists it's working. Major firms like Apple and Hyundai have pledged billions to ensure production, and federal coffers have grown, with new tariffs projected to generate over $166 billion. But critics warn, the short-term pain may not bring long-term gain. With growth uncertain, inflation persistent, and markets uneasy, Trump's economic gamble
is at a
crossroads. Is this protectionism with a purpose or a path to prolonged economic strain?
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the analysis of the first quarter GDP shock amid tariff wars, we're joined from New York by Mr. Peter Tanos, and the economic expert and chairman of Links Investment Advisory, as well as Mr. Peter Roth from Washington, a contributing editor at Newsweek. Thank you both for joining us here on Think Tank. Let me start off with Mr. Tanos. How do you see the sweeping tariffs on Chinese goods reshaping the global trade alliances, and what are the long-term risks to the U.S. economic leadership?
The China tariffs are the single most important tariff issue on the table today because they are so huge and because we import $500 billion worth of goods from China every year. The first quarter slowdown was not so much due to the tariffs as it was to the anticipation of the tariffs. People don't want to make decisions until they know where this is going to sort out. The president knows well that he needs a deal with China, and he needs it in the second quarter before the second quarter tanks. So I think we can expect some improvement there. Look for some relief from China tariffs before the second quarter is over.
Okay, what about you, Mr. Roth? To what extent do you believe that Trump's tariffs are to blame for the first quarter's GDP contraction versus legacy factors like Biden-era budget deficits?
Oh, it's good to be with you, and certainly there was a contraction that was expected. This is not a surprise. The size a little bit bigger than people were expecting, but Peter's right. It's motivated by expectations of what may happen and people safeguarding, for example, consumption rather than investment to front load inventories, and putting off business building activities until we know if there'll be tariffs or if there won't be tariffs. Also, we're facing a major tax increase at the end of the year. The tax bill probably should have been done by now. It's not. The expensing deduction gets smaller and smaller and ultimately goes away. There's a threat to raise all rates on the personal side, which will hit small business badly. There's even been some talk of raising the top rate for incomes over $1 million, which would be bad for small business. In the extension of the Trump tax cuts. So that uncertainty as well. People are holding back on investment, holding back on savings until they know what's coming. The thing markets hate most is uncertainty.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, if we could build on that idea, you both spoke about the idea of expectations or investor expectations. Given the first quarter is contracted by 0.3%, what signals should investors sort of watch out for regarding corporate profitability and market volatility in the next quarter?
It's just like our friend just said, the market and business people hate uncertainty. I mean, think about it. If you own a store or if you own a small factory and you're dependent on imports for your products, or you're dependent on imports for many of the components of what you make in your factory, you can't very well anticipate what your profits are going to be if you don't know what the tariffs are going to be. And so far, tariffs have been a ping pong match of on and off. And it is not surprising that business people are confused, which is why we need to bring some order to this process, and we need to do it, and the president needs to do it very soon.
Okay, Mr. Roth, since we're talking about the tariffs now, how are the retaliatory tariffs from China and other nations affecting America's geopolitical standings and domestic industries, especially given that, like Mr. Thanos said, it's been a ping-pong situation, and Donald Trump has backtracked sometimes and then put his foot down again other times. How does that work?
Well, the first thing that people have to understand is Trump is different from traditional politicians. When traditional politicians negotiate in public, they're actually negotiating. When Trump negotiates in public, it's because he's trying to extract concessions from the people he's trying to get concessions from without actually having to give anything up. And so Trump thinks that by announcing the tariff schedule, he got 50, 75, 113, depending on who you talk to, countries to come knocking on our door saying, wait a minute, we don't want tariffs. We don't want to deal with that. Let's negotiate. Let's talk. And so you've got some number of conversations underway with countries.
So this is happening.
This is happening.
Yes.
America is probably better positioned, at least the White House says it's happening. America is at least better positioned to withstand tariffs on our goods being sold in other countries than other countries are to withstand tariffs on their goods being sold here. This is a big leverage point that Trump is counting on to bring people to the table. We have been pursuing lower tariffs since the end of the Second World War. The whole global economy and globalization is based on the idea of free trade. The president is not wrong when he says that America's trading partners, the Chinese, the Europeans, others, are not fair in the way they allow American goods and services into their countries, that they engage in protectionist behavior. And we have tried to say, America has tried to say, look, we're not going to treat you that way. Don't treat us that way. And the rest of the world goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, by threatening tariffs, Trump has got the rest of the world to say, hey, wait a minute now. We didn't realize you were serious. Let's talk about this. That creates tremendous uncertainty. And in the long run, it may work out in lower rates for lower tariffs for everybody and the elimination of trade barriers and currency manipulation, which the Chinese are particularly guilty of. Then again, it may not. But until we know where that's going to go, investors are going to be cautious.
Okay, Mr. Tanos, I'm sure you what Mr. Roth talked about, the idea of protectionist policies across the board and the world. And now America's doing it. In your opinion, why is inflation still persisting despite a shrinking economy? And how might these protectionist policies exacerbate this trend that America is trying to do right now with the tariffs?
Yeah, well, inflation is going to be a direct result of the tariffs. Imagine if we start paying 25% more for every foreign car we import, you can imagine what that does to inflation, plus all the goods we import from China. It is true that based on the number, China needs the United States more than the U.S. needs China. But politically speaking, China is in a much better position, and President Xi is in a much better position to endure the pain and to get his people to endure the pain than President Trump is to get Americans to endure the pain. And this is why that a trade deal with China is going to be very important. And to your point, Raham, the fact is that inflation will persist until these tariffs are brought under control. One last point for me on this. We need some tariff relief to help balance the budget. We are running a $2 trillion a year budget deficit, and the only kind of taxes that will help solve that problem are major tariffs. And so we do need some tariffs just to help balance the budget.
If I could just follow up there, Mr. Tanos, you talked about the idea of China being at a better position to politically absorb, I suppose, the inflation rate when it comes to their citizens and so forth. If this persists, what does this mean for the position of Donald Trump and for the average American because of inflation?
Yeah, I mean, what it means is that President Trump has got to solve this problem very quickly. They're going to, and I announced on with you on another program that we'll have a deal with India very soon because it's an easy deal to make. We'll probably have a deal with with Japan very quickly. But the one we need the most is China. China is today forging relationships with the European Union, with South American countries in anticipation of problems with the U.S. We have got to solve this problem before these new relationships are ingrained and difficult to undo. This is what everybody needs to be looking for. Look for some kind of relief on the huge tariffs with China, which the president even admitted were too high, before we get some sort of relief in the United States and better sentiment among American consumers.
Okay, Mr. Roth, now if you could also give us your perspective on this. Mr. Thanos talked about the idea of having to engage with China because they're more of a, they're important in the market, obviously. The US is reportedly engaging with China through multiple channels. Could these negotiations somehow ease the tensions, or will there be prolonged economic instability? Because we've seen like a bit of a tiff between both sides.
Well, we've had an ongoing tiff with the Chinese now for at least a decade. And Peter's right that President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party are better able to withstand the political pressure of a bad economy, but you really can't compare their democratic system to our democratic system, which is why they're better positioned to withstand the political plane. Nobody in the Chinese Communist Party loses an election that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want them to lose. The same thing is not true here in the United States. And so President Trump has to be very careful, and indeed is acknowledging now that his tariff agenda may in the short term cause some political pain for some Republicans. And there are Republicans who don't like that, and they've come out against the tariffs. Overall, though, it reflects a division in the Republican Party between the people who believe that tariffs are an impetus to protect jobs and the people who think that free trade provides quality goods at low prices to the benefit of workers and families. It's a substantive policy division that is being worked out. President Trump represents really, in a strange way, the free trade pro-growth wing of the party. Vice President Vance represents the protectionist wing of the party, who thinks that the center of America has been hollowed out by businesses sending jobs to China and Vietnam and Korea and Mexico. That's all wrapped up into the politics of this conversation. But as far as inflation is concerned, inflation now is relatively under control. We have some level of price stability. The tariffs could disrupt that. But the problem politically that President Trump is having here is that when he said he was going to stop inflation, what people thought was that meant he was going to give us back the economy we had in his first term, and that prices were going to come down. And deflation is in many ways as bad as inflation. People are upset that they're still paying higher prices in some places, but the price of gasoline, which is the fundamental building block of the U.S. economy, is down considerably, and that's going to help in the long run.
So, sir, do you believe that these channels of communication between the U.S. and China will be somehow fruitful, or they're going to reach some sort of consensus?
I think that it's in the interests of both countries to reach a consensus. It's in the long-term interest of the Chinese to stop their currency manipulation, but also to lower the trade barriers. President Xi is facing a demographic crisis. Pretty soon, there aren't going to be enough young working Chinese around to support all the older Chinese who are now living on their pensions. He's got to act, and he's got to act quickly. The better deal he can get with the United States, which will be a better deal for the United States, and the more likely he is to preside over a Chinese economy that continues to grow rather than contracts.
Okay, Mr. Thanos, what about you? What are your thoughts? Major firms are reshoring of production. Can these moves somehow offset the rising costs faced by small businesses and consumers?
Yeah, but I agree with everything my colleague just said. And by the way, that was a very good explanation of why China can withstand politically the pain of these tariffs and the consequences better than the U.S. can, which has to do with our political freedom. The fact is that we need to solve this problem very quickly, because if the tariffs persist, they will be inflationary. China is retaliating where it knows it hurts. China is putting tariffs on items from the United States that will hurt farmers, which is a strong base of support for President Trump, and they know it. They will also be waiting to see what the United States is prepared to do to solve this problem, and they're trying very hard not to make the first phone call, even though the administration says, oh, they're calling us all the time. Well, no, they're not. But they are sending delegations, and lower level authorities are coming to the United States, and negotiations will start. Bottom line is that the president knows well he has to solve this problem, and he has to solve it quickly.
Okay, Mr. Roth, if voter frustration continues to grow due to the rising cost of living, could Republicans face some sort of significant loss in November's midterms?
Oh, absolutely. And I said, I think the president is acknowledging that. There are some House seats on the bubble that could go to the Democrats and give Democrats the control of the lower chamber of Congress. I don't think there's really a scenario out there where the Democrats regain control of the Senate. That has more to do with which senators are up in which states, because only a third of the Senate is up at any 2-year period. Then it has to do with the president's popularity or job approval. The country really is still divided between the red states and the blue states, the Trump states and the not Trump states. And there are very few states in between that could swing either way. But the House map very much could be affected, will be affected by the economy. And in a good economy, the Republicans will go up seats. In a bad economy, the Republicans will go down seats, which means they lose control because they only control it by 3 or 4 or 5 seats on any given day.
Okay, Mr. Tennis, what about you? What's your take? Consumer confidence obviously has hit a 12-year low. What measures could restore the trust in the economy given the rising prices and the uncertainty? And what does this mean for confidence as well in the Republican Party?
Was that to me or him?
Yes.
Yeah, consumer confidence is obviously very important. It's a statistic that both parties look at very, very carefully. Consumer confidence is still pretty high, but it's eroding again because of the uncertainty. Now, in a paradox, the stock market isn't doing all that badly. This sounds a little weird and it's very convoluted, but the stock market is doing well because a slowdown means that there's more likely to be a reduction in interest rates, which the stock market likes very much. But this gets into some very bizarre explanations that we probably should leave aside for now and do for another day. But bottom line, consumer confidence is very important. It's going to depend on how quickly these issues get resolved. And the biggest single issue is China.
Okay, thank you both so much. That was Mr. Peter Tenos, an economic expert and the chairman of Links Investment Advisory, and Mr. Peter Roth, a contributing editor at Newsweek. Thank you both for your insights and thank you for joining us. Thank you. Amid tariff wars and global uncertainty, the US faces pivotal choices on trade, inflation, and leadership. Can America balance protectionism with prosperity, or will economic strain reshape its future? That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of an ever-changing world. I'm Ham Morrissey. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.